Hey guys, welcome back. This is our second week in the book of Jonah. And last week we saw this guy named Jonah. We got introduced to him. This guy who has this awesome name, this idea of this peace and truth of God. That's supposed to go out and share the good news of God's kingship and his authority and what he requires of all of us and his rule over the whole world with the people around him. But Jonah, if you remember, isn't so psyched about that idea. Jonah actually has some other plans. Jonah thinks that God's plan sounds pretty tough and pretty hard, and he is actually going to just sort of yeet out over in the opposite direction of where God has called him to go, and he might just be able to outrun the presence and plan of God for his life. And we see that as Jonah goes along, things start to get rougher and rougher for him. There's this storm, and then he's getting interrogated by these sailors around him about what's going on, and eventually they figure out that God, the God of everything, is chasing Jonah down, and they're like, man, what are we gonna do? And Jonah's like, and they're like, Jonah, what do we do? And Jonah's like, I don't know, man, because I'm not going back. And they're like, you just have to throw me over the edge. Jonah doesn't say turn around and listen to what God has to say. He says, no, just keep on trucking away from God's plan. And eventually these guys say, Lord, forgive us, but we're throwing this guy off because we're not willing to die. We're not participating in trying to steal this guy away from your plan and purpose. So they toss Jonah overboard. And we see as soon as they do that the storm quiets, and these sailors are amazed that this is the God that controls everything. It controls the sea. And we'll talk a little bit more about the sea today. But this idea is that Jonah has stubbornly signed his own death warrant. Jonah has ignored God's plan and God's calling in his life at every step along the way. And now we find Jonah in the ocean, sinking, not able to swim. This guy is going to die. But at the very end of last chapter, we didn't leave you with a cliffhanger too much. We see that God sends a fish, and the fish swallows Jonah. And you've all heard this story, so that probably wasn't a surprise. But today, we have Jonah's reflection inside the fish. We have Jonah's moment of going, oh crap, maybe I've been doing something wrong. We see Jonah in slow motion as he begins to sink beneath the water. And this is chapter 2. And I think there's a lot to get here. So hang out for a minute and we'll figure out what this guy Jonah, how his perspective shifts when the crap really hits the fan here. Then, sinking below the water, Jonah prayed to the Lord, his God, from the belly of the fish. And he said, I called out to the Lord in my distress, and he answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried. Sheol is the land of the dead. So he says, I call out of the land of the dead, but you still heard my voice. Maybe this was a God that Jonah couldn't have gotten away from no matter how far he ran in the first place. Yeah, you see what's going on? Even from the land of the dead, God heard his voice. Not saying that Jonah was dead, but he's saying that the ocean is like the land of the dead. He is dying, 100%, if God does not intervene. He said, for you, God, cast me into the deep waters, into the hearts of the seas, and the flood surrounded me. All of your waves and your billows passed over me. So Jonah's getting tossed around with the waves. He's getting pushed under. And he says something interesting that we don't think about. But for the people of Jonah's day, the sea was the biggest and scariest and most powerful and chaotic thing that they knew about. I want you to think, if you were way, thousands and thousands of years ago, the sea is, the thing. There's, land, and you can grow, crops on that, and you can, walk around on that, and there's some of it. But then out there there is just water and water and water and water and water and water forever. And nobody can control it, and nobody can stop it. And when the tide comes in, it comes in. And when the tide goes out, it comes out. And it breaks ships that you build like toys. But Jonah says that that water is God's. And he commands it. And it's God that casts him into the deep, and it's going to be God that saves him. Jonah says something more. I am driven away from your sight. Ben, I just thought you said that Jonah couldn't get out of the sight of God, that he couldn't get out of the presence of God, right? This we're talking about right now, we're talking about relational separation. Jonah and God's relationship is broken. Like, it's like that thing when you're like upset with somebody, or there's some awkwardness, or there's something not going right between you, you don't really want to look at that person, right? You don't want to really make eye contact with them because it's going to bring all that up. Like, God is kind of averting his eyes from Jonah because Jonah has like so dissed on God's plan for him, and like the respect and honor that God had for him, and what God had called him to do, like this important mission. And Jonah's just like, no, I'm running. So he's like out of the sight of God, right? God could just like turn his back and be like, yo, this guy's drowning. It's not my problem. Like, this is where he went. This is what he chose. But that's not what he does. I'm driven away from your sight, yet I will look again upon your holy temple. The temple for Jonah is the place of God's presence. He says, I'm far away from you right now, and our relationship is broken, but if you save me, and I believe that you are going to save me, I'm going to come and I'm going to seek you again. Because I have realized that where I'm running to doesn't really have anything. Doesn't really fulfill anything. I realize that me running out into the sea, I can't get away from your knowledge or your presence. All that I've succeeded in is breaking our relationship. The waters closed in over me to take my life, and the deep surrounded me. Weeds wrapped around my head, and I was at the root of the mountains. And I went down to that land, and its bars closed upon me forever. Yet you brought my life up out of the grave, O Lord my God. Jonah's situation is rough. And there's only one way that he's going to get out of it. Jonah has chased himself into a corner that there is no way in getting out of. Right? He said, man, I'm going to die if I go to Nineveh and talk to these people. But Jonah is going to die now. He might have survived that. They are people, right? Jonah cannot fight the ocean. Jonah cannot swim to shore. Jonah is dead. Even more certainly than if he would have gone to Nineveh. But God, in both situations, has a different plan. And his will is more powerful than the current reality that Jonah can see, and we get to see God save him. God is literally, or not literally, he's going to metaphorically resurrect Jonah. Jonah is as good as dead, but God is going to bring him back to life. When my life was fading away, as he ran out of breath, I remembered the Lord, and I prayed to you. Jonah's stubbornness is finally broken. He said, and I came back into the holy temple. Your relationship with me was restored, not because of something like fancy or good that I did, but you reached back out to me as I prayed to you, and you accepted me back in. He said, those who pay regard to vain idols forsake their hope of mercy or steadfast love. So that's a sentence. We're going to break that down. So, those who pay regards to vain idols. That's a weird sentence. People who give up everything, who put all of their value in fake gods, and gods that ultimately aren't real. People who put all their value somewhere except from God and think that that is like the thing in life, and that is what they love and they value and they give everything to. And it's not the God of the Bible, the God of creation. the God who came down in Jesus Christ and died for you and me, if it's not that God, Jonah says they're idiots. Because all of those things are without the power to save, and when you screw up, and you will screw up, when you do something and you need forgiveness, when you are less than perfect, when you can't meet the standard that is set for you by whatever it is that you have chosen for your idol, whether that's success or popularity or fame or comfort or whatever it is, they're without mercy. They don't give you second chances. They don't care about how you're doing. The sailors came to realize the power of the one true God as they saw him over the wind and the waves. And when they heard from Jonah who he was, they quickly realized that this was God. But sometimes you and I are more easily fooled because we don't worship wooden statues. We worship other things like money, like our popularity, like our time. I think a lot of times we worship our time and our comfort, those things that I want to do to just kind of make me feel good, just to do something and to waste my life away. But Jonah says that's foolishness, and he says why? Because you're giving up your hope of steadfast love. When you give yourself to God's plan, when you follow God's plan, when you listen to him, if Jonah would have gone to Nineveh, he would have been squarely in the steadfast love of God. But guys, here's the awesome thing about God. It's because Jonah wasn't in the steadfast love of God, because he ran away somewhere else. God, because he sinned, right? God has not forsaken Jonah. He's not left him out to dry. In fact, some of you might be like, man, God was a jerk last week, chasing Jonah down and making him do what he wanted to do. And I kind of talked about this electric fence and the dog. No, God's steadfast love sucked Jonah out, and he inflicted pain on him. He almost drowns this guy to get him to realize that he is going the wrong way, and he is running away from the one person who has absolutely steadfast love for him. And when he realizes that, he cries out in prayer, and God says, yes, welcome back into relationship with me. I am going to save you. My love is steadfast. So steadfast that even when you run away from it, it will pursue you. And sometimes that pursuit may not be comfortable. Because sometimes that pursuit is acknowledging our own selfishness and sin. But God's steadfast love will pursue you. Jonah starts to wrap up. But I, with a voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you. God's steadfast love, his sacrificial steadfast love, as we know in Jesus and as we've seen throughout the Bible, demands response from us. And Jonah gets it right. Thanksgiving and sacrifice. We, in thankfulness for all God is doing and all that we can never repay, and his mercy and love for us, we give ourselves in service of him. We give our life over in love and service of him, and we make him our God. We don't serve these other idols with our time and with our money. We don't make those the number one thing. We put God in that chair. And Jonah says, what I have vowed, I will pay. God, what you say, I'm going to do. I am good as my word, because salvation belongs to the Lord. God saves who he will. There's no way to be saved other than through the will of God. Jonah is not going to be saved in this situation except for the will of God. And the same is true for you and me in our lives. We are not going to be saved from living a life of apathy or meaninglessness or sin or brokenness except through God. Salvation belongs to the Lord. And it's this beautiful poem about Jonah's hopeless situation that he got himself into, even though he knew better. But God saves him. And our ending. The Lord spoke. And just like he spoke to everything except Jonah and it obeyed, the sailors, the wind, the waves, the fish hears God speak, and he spits him up. And now Jonah knows that it's his turn to listen too. Bye, guys.